I've been in Treasury 41 years, and over that time I think I've seen probably half a dozen Prime Ministers, 7 or 8 Ministers of Finance. I started off in 65, no, 75, I'm not that old, 75, when at the sort of the end of the Longy government and the beginning of Muldoon government. And so I've been here during the Think Big project, which none of you will have heard about, but the steel mill, etc., etc., etc. The turbulence over the years when we almost ran out of money in the 1980s, where we ended up, I guess, in a crisis situation. One of the things I was responsible for was doing legal work in terms of borrowing offshore funding, and the week before the 1984 election, we borrowed $1,000 million from Japan, and I went on leave. I went to a course in London over that weekend, the Saturday, and the election was on the Saturday. So when I got back, I asked people what had happened to the $1,000 million. And they said, oh, we spent it all defending the exchange rate. Because at that stage, of course, we had a fixed exchange rate. So $1,000 million literally spent in a couple of days. So we were really in a bad situation. I've been there at that time when we also did the big change in New Zealand in terms of corporatisation. Now again, most of you won't understand this, but there used to be the post office, which used to also be Post Bank, which also used to be telecommunications, and basically it was a monopoly. We owned the airlines, we owned Air New Zealand, we had the railways, we owned virtually all of the power generators, we owned the transmission company. All of those were government departments, and they were all corporatised and put into the state-owned enterprise framework. Now, I helped devise the state-owned enterprise framework and the legislation which set that up. Also involved then in terms of getting the departments into these corporations. So that was a pretty fair task. We ended up then, of course, privatising. So I've been involved in virtually all of the privatisations that have been done by the New Zealand government. Then the other bit of that, of course, is also the rescues. So I was involved in the BNZ rescue in 1990, the rescue of Air New Zealand in 2001, which is a story in itself, in the sense that the day we thought we had done the transaction, we had agreed the transaction, that same night was 9/11, so the solution didn't work. So we're back to negotiating a different solution. So that's just some of the background of some of the stuff I did when I was in the legal area. I moved into the policy area, and I worked on the regulatory quality side of things, trying to get the quality regulations better. And then my latest job is really in the natural resources sector, where I am involved in trying to find some solutions to our water issues, which is a huge issue, obviously. So that's some of the background. But what I thought would be really interesting is to try and bring together a whole lot of the stuff you've heard over the last day and so, which is really, you've heard a lot from a whole lot of Treasury people in different areas, like climate change, education, social welfare, etc., 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 right? So there's a whole lot of stuff, but part of the problem is it's all a bit siloed. So what you don't perhaps see is the complexities and the interrelationship between those topics and how each one has in fact impinges on another. And then you throw in the uncertainties, which you heard from our last speakers, around technology change, right? The future. None of us can predict what it is, but we know it's not going to be the same as today. It is going to be different. So trying to devise policy in today's environment for tomorrow or for 5 years' time is really, really hard. I think there's some truth in the fact that, in a sense, bureaucrats and politicians can't be ahead of the electorate. The electorate, you have to bring the electorate with you, because you literally, the big changes I've seen over the years have all been able to be done because there's a crisis. There's a need to do it, which meant that things could be done. When things are relatively stable, there's no burning platform. There's no incentive to move away from the status quo. So therefore you inch your way forward and you don't make the big leaps. And politicians are well aware that they could do more, but will the electorate go with them? And if you think about the way politicians think, you're a politician because you want to be in office. Being on the opposition bench is no fun, right? So the whole incentive is to try and make progress, but not so much progress that you fall out of line. But as Linda was saying, at times they do fall behind, they then catch up, and that's a good thing. But it also demonstrates how important these groups like yourselves are, because you can actually make a difference. By your voices, you can call for change. You can show that there is an appetite for change out there, which will help politicians make some of those brave decisions, which otherwise they could not do. What I've seen over my years is how things change. One of my things I say is never say never. What was impossible 5 years ago may be possible tomorrow, simply because the environment changes, the circumstances change, and things start aligning. And people say, oh, of course we could do that. But if you'd said that to them, no way could you possibly do that, they'd have said 5 years ago. I was involved in the Central North Island forestry settlement. Now, we did that over a period of 6 months, but had been 12 years in its gestation, right? We couldn't get it done until suddenly there was an environment where it suddenly became possible. So a lot of what we do in policy, I think, is about being ready, actually having the thinking done, and it's not going to be perfect, but you'll be amazed at how much can be done if you're ready. Now, one of the stories I tell about the whole state-owned enterprises policy is that the work had been done in that area 2 to 3 years previous to that, when we had a Minister of Finance and Prime Minister who didn't want to hear from us. So we had some people in the back room saying, well, what would we do if we had a clean sheet of paper? What would we think would be a better way for delivery of public services in New Zealand? And from that, they devised the whole state enterprise policy. So when the time came and a Labor government was looking for something different, suddenly a Labor government willing to, get rid of departments, you wouldn't have believed it, right? But it was only possible because that work had been done by 3 or 4 people over a period of time, and they'd worked it all through. So one of the things I think we are not very good at is actually investing in the future. And that is where you're not seeing tangible results tomorrow, or maybe in 3 years' time, maybe if it's 5 years' time. We don't have enough foresight to worry about, let's be brave here. Let's think about these things. Yes, you might not be able to do them today, but by heck, when the time comes, you might be able to do it. One of my other things I say to people is, look, never waste a good crisis, right? Because that is when things can get done. You've got a crisis situation on your hands. You've got ministers sort of saying, oh, what on earth are we going to do? And you say, well, Minister, we've been doing some thinking about this, and here's how we've been thinking. What would you think about this? And yeah, part of our job is also to get politicians onto the same page, even if they may not think that they need to be on the same page. So there's a bit of an art to that. That's part of our job. End of the day, the thinking and the debate are critical. The thing I say about Treasury is that it is a place where you're free to debate the issues. You're not going to get closed down quickly. We don't have a real hierarchy here. So, the young graduate can take on the Secretary to the Treasury, and if he's got good ideas, or she's got good ideas, she can debate them with him. And there's a willingness to actually have that debate, which is one of the strengths of this organisation. It's not the same throughout the public service, I might say. It is a bit unusual, but it's part of why I think this organisation has been successful. It is that willingness to have the debate, and that's what I like about this sort of gathering, that you're having a debate. Nobody has a monopoly on wisdom. Nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. You won't find that out until you start talking to one another, and constructive listening, constructive debate, willing to say, okay, well, I don't agree with you, and that's fine, but why? What's the alternative? Why don't you agree? The other bit of it I think we probably haven't done as well as we could have over years is we haven't been that close to the New Zealand public, and partly that's because of the way that the organisation is sort of recruited. We tend to be, and I'm an exception, we tend to be middle class, white, more females now than there used to be, but used to be middle class, white males. And if you think about the backgrounds, people who have gone through university, have had a university education, and don't necessarily have the connections into the real world. And if you come here as a graduate and you haven't ever done a real job outside, then you are sort of a bit insular. And I think some of the stuff where this is being done here now is about trying to connect to the real world out there, different ideas, different concepts, valuing those ideas what they are, because we all have a status quo bias. It's just one of those things that's easy. The status quo is a hell of a lot easier than something new and different and innovative. And there are risks with innovation. And public servants generally tend to be rather risk averse. So all of that doesn't help you get to where you need to get to, which is why, again, these sort of groups where you don't have any inhibitions about what you might say, and it's I guess, a safe environment to have those discussions. We will disagree with one another, I'm sure, but that is not a bad thing. In fact, the worst thing you have is everybody agreeing. There's got to be something wrong if you get into that sort of situation, because whatever it may be, there will be different perspectives, and that's, I think, what Treasury is trying to do with its diversity program. It's trying to diversify. It's trying to get more different sort of people in here, so they're not just economics people. So we'll have history graduates, psychology graduates, geography graduates, music graduates, whatever. They each bring a slightly different perspective. Ethnicity is again an issue, because again we've tended to be somewhat dominated by white European. That is changing. We are starting to get more Maori and other Pacific Islands and other ethnic groups in, and there's a conscious effort to do that. And it's all part of a drive to try to make Treasury a better place, and a better place for what reason? To better serve the New Zealand public, right? Because ultimately that's our only goal in life, is to actually try and make New Zealand better. We have a huge opportunity in this place to do that.